Hey friends, this is Mike, and you are listening to a very special edition of the Storied Arcs podcast. What we have for you today is Alex and I hosted a meetup at a local manga shop in Cincinnati. I say a local, but it's really the local manga shop in Cincinnati. It is called Manga Manga, and you can find them on Instagram or their website, and I think you can even buy online if you want to support them. But what we did was a Friday night meetup where we got together with fans of comics and manga and just sat around and talked about what we liked. We did a little trivia at the end. And so for the first, half hour or so, I think it was kind of one conversation around a couple different microphones. And then you'll start to hear it splinter off. And I don't know if this is going to make great audio content or not. But I figured, why not release it and see if anybody can get some great manga recommendations out of it. I certainly got a full list of reading assignments, some incredible art that I'm very excited to read and check out. So I hope that if you listen to this, you enjoy listening to the conversation. Feel free to skip around. And I will warn you that there is one point in time where you may hear my daughter come up and say, "Dad," and then you hear the recording stop for about 30 seconds and then pick back up. So there is no smooth transition there. That just is what it is. And it's around the 37, 38 minute mark. Anyway, without any further ado, here is our Manga Manga meetup night. Well, so I've been debating how we're going to do trivia. Are you guys interested in trivia? Okay.
I only know really niche comics.
Well, so here's what I was thinking was instead of really complicated questions that I didn't even know most of the answers to, we switch it to, have you ever done, last call trivia?
Yeah.
You know how their bonus rounds are a number, and whoever guesses the closest. So I've got a bunch of comic and manga-related questions that are all numeric. And so we can bust that out in a little bit. But the first thing I wanted to do is, get everybody's top favorite manga, and if you have a favorite comic recommendation, and if you're willing to come sit into the microphone for our podcast listeners, you don't even have to ID yourself. You can be an anonymous voice on the internet, which nothing ominous about that. Okay.
My tastes are terrible.
No, there's the literal definition of taste is that it can't be terrible or not. It's so subjective, and I like books that other people can't really understand why, and I don't feel the need to defend it. I tell you why I like it, but there's no reason to defend it.
I don't know. I've seen some pretty bad comics and manga in my time.
Well, there are definitely bad ones, and I will call out a bad one when I see it, but I'm not going to take it away from somebody who likes it, is my point.
Take it away. If you like it, you like it. I'm just saying, to me, it just wasn't a good experience.
Yeah, so I'll go first. My favorite ongoing, still running manga is Spy Family. And partially because it was the first one I ever got. I had never read manga before Manga Manga moved in. I came into the shop, asked for recommendations. The first book that Jacqueline recommended was Skullface, the bookseller one. Right, because she was like, well, this is what I identify with as a bookseller. And I started flipping through it. I'm like, this seems like a lot of really niche references to different types of manga and manga readers. And I'm like, I can tell that I want to get the humor, but I don't. So then I picked up Spy Family, and I was laughing out loud in bed reading it. And then I started passing them over to my wife when I was finished with them, and then she would be chuckling to herself. And we were in our second trimester with our first kid. And so now I have a daughter named Anya.
So what is it about that book that draws you to it? Is it the humor? Is it the setup, the characters?
It's everything working together because there are and if you guys, we all read Spy Family or have read some Spy Family.
Well, I've watched the show.
Watched it, yeah. Just same bit. There are episodes and chapters that are legitimate, spy espionage, can get a little tense. There are action scenes which I think rival almost any kind of non-supernatural action-y stuff. There's a whole book about this tennis tournament that they have to enter for different things. And then it's laugh out loud funny, which you can very rarely say because I very rarely laugh out loud when I'm alone. So it's like the fusion of that. But the basic setup is the daughter is a telepath. The dad is a spy for it's like an East-West Germany situation, but fictitious countries. And the mom's an assassin. But he needs to infiltrate the eastern country, I think.
Yeah.
And the best way to do that is to get in touch with the head party leader. And he's very recluse, so the only way to get in touch with him is through his family. His son goes to this private academy, and he's like, shoot, I need to get a kid so that I can get a kid enrolled in that academy. So he goes to the adoption center, picks out a kid who impresses him, seems the brightest because she can read minds and knows exactly what he's thinking. So, and then he's like, well, this is a very traditional school. They're not going to allow me to go in as a man with no wife. So then he finds a city council worker who also needs a husband for appearance's sake. So they have a fake marriage. She moonlights as an assassin. He does not know that about her. He is a spy. She does not know that about him. And Anya, the 4-year-old, is a telepath, so she knows everything about everyone. And then eventually she gets a pet dog who has foresight and premonitions, but can't communicate them to anyone other than Anya, who can read his mind. So it's kind of like a super family where only the 4-year-old is in on all of it.
She's technically, I think it was like 10 or 9 or so.
Really? I thought
Like she
he needed a 6-year-old, so she lied and said I'm 6.
needed some kid that's like first grade, I think. Like that's where they start at, because it's like an elevator academy, sort of like they go up no matter what, pretty much. And I remember when he's getting her, he's thinking, gosh, like I need a 9 or so year old, and she's listening in on him, obviously, and she's like, oh, I'm that, and it's like, really? You don't
Yeah.
know?
So whatever it was, maybe she lied. And either way, she said she was a certain age because she could read his mind and knew. So anyway, it's all hilarious. Usually their whole mission, no matter what else is going on, comes down to her befriending the bully at school and not punching him in the nose, which she did. The first time, twice. But the first time she met him, it's like you had a prime directive. It was befriend this kid so we can get into his house, and instead you punch him in the nose and have detention, and are about to get kicked out of the academy. So anyway,
And he ends up falling for her, and he pulls the whole tsundere act. He's like, I don't like her or anything. I just think she's weird and all that. It's like, we can tell you like her, dude.
yeah. Well, and she's a telepath.
Yeah, you can even. But
Yeah, and then the side characters, her friend Becky is hilarious.
he loves his dad.
Who's the guy in charge of all the costumes for Twilight? The weird guy with the curly hair.
I don't remember.
It's just it keeps getting bigger and bigger, and in America we're on book 11 or 12 now, in terms of what's been translated, and they're not even one step closer to accomplishing a mission. So this thing could go forever.
I mean, right now they're only on season 2 with Hulu.
Yeah. Well, and is Hulu the place to watch? It's on Crunchyroll too, right?
Well, it's because it's associated with Crunchyroll, that also is associated with Hulu.
Okay. I got it. But there was some caveat, you can only watch subs, not dubs, on Hulu.
Well, no, it depends on what you're looking for. They'll have a playlist where it's side by side, there's dub, sub, dub, sub, dub. They'll switch it off, and then, or sometimes they'll just be full sub list while they had another list that's behind fully dubbed.
I got you. Okay. Cool. Is anyone willing to step up to the mic and share favorite manga and why? Or anime?
I mean, no one else is gonna do
Yeah.
it. I have.
Yeah. If not, we'll just go into the store and start.
I'm trying to debate what is my favorite.
Well, have a seat.
What are you reading
Go
right now,
close to the
maybe?
mic.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, what you're reading right now
Okay,
is
sure,
a good place
yeah.
to start.
Yeah, I've been starting with Hat Atelier, and I really enjoy. I mean, the line work for one thing is really gorgeous for it, and it's
Wait, I need to
With-
Google what you're Googling.
yeah.
Yeah.
I realize
Okay.
Google.
Yeah.
I have other faves too. That I always read like a million things at once.
Me too. Yeah.
Yeah, because I've also been on and off reading Berserk. 'Cause
Oh yeah.
I mean-
as you can afford to if you're buying the big ones.
I've been borrowing from the library because I don't have
I
space.
always forget about that.
Yeah. The library has a really nice manga section, honestly. From
Well, and what's the digital Hoopla?
yeah. There's also Hoopla,
Sorry, what was that name? The
Witch Hat Atelier.
Okay, so what's the genre?
I guess it's basically a fantasy. Like in the world, the basic idea is that only people who were born as mages can become a mage or like a witch.
Right.
And
This sounds familiar.
the main character was not born as such, so they assume they can never do it until they end up meeting this like
Okay.
witch with a hat that comes by, and she ends up seeing how magic is done and is able to replicate that and do it. So
I see. Okay.
this witch he finds out, and basically they end up taking her to the world of magic, and from
Okay.
there like stuff.
Wow, okay.
That's the first volume, at least the first bit of the first volume. So
Yeah.
from there things escalate.
But this is like, forgive the simple comparison, but this is like in Harry Potter, if they found out you could give a muggle magic, like all of a sudden.
Kinda, it's more like the truth was that magic was not that exclusive. So it was basically being touted as something that only people who are born into it can do.
Okay.
So it's like almost like a secret being kept.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's right up my alley. Because, like, that's my level of fantasy. So is it set on Earth?
It's one of those things where it's like, it's not. I don't think it's listed as like a separate planet or anything, so I assume it's like a fantasy
is it like,
Earth.
do they
but
have cell phones and
no,
technology?
it's like
Okay.
ancient.
It's like medieval.
Yeah, it's like a different
Okay.
but I have a few for like anime that's a little bit closer to that. There's like Little Witch Academia, which is also really
Little Witch Academia?
Little Witch
that
Academia.
one I do know.
Wait, is that related to My Hero?
No,
No.
it came around the same time, I think.
It's just, okay.
Just
One-
very coincidental.
I guess the only time I've used the word academia.
One's
It's with
about
me.
a group of superheroes in a world like that's Earth, but everybody has powers. And one is more or less kind of like Earth, but a little more medieval, I guess.
like they go to a different area, so that you don't see that much of the tech. But I mean, the tech comes more in season 2.
Yeah,
With
it's, more,
stuff.
it's mostly
Okay.
more just like medieval in the first
But
season.
the second season gets more of that tech. But yeah, this is like for Witch Hat Atelier. It's like the
Ooh.
cover, like the
I
line
do love
art.
the art,
Even
yeah.
within like the pages, the line art has this kind of quality to it, and it's really pretty.
that looks, I mean, that's a similar style. What I've got here, Go to Hiru is an art team from Japan. They're pair of artists. I actually have their names. They Chifuya Sasaki and Naoki Kawano. They work together. Interestingly, their origin story is they out of art school they submitted their art to a publisher who was running competition, and they finished second. And the publisher actually said, and they were kind of encouraged, like, we're not certain your style actually works in Japan, maybe try the American market, was something they had drawn from. But you look at it from the Western standpoint, and it's so very clearly in a manga-based style.
Yeah.
But over in Japan, though, they thought, hey, maybe it works for the American style, and it did. They came over, or at least they started doing work in the U.S. They're insanely popular. They do a lot of younger YA focused stuff because their style is conducive to that.
Right.
And this book here, Superman Smash the Clan, is very much a YA focused. It's a YA focused book.
Right. Yeah, I've been meaning to read it. As
Yeah,
well.
it's an update of an old Superman radio serial story where Superman takes on the KKK. This was redone with Jean Louis Yang, who's a Chinese American author, and Go to Hiru said they just have a style that people are drawn to. That when people people look at they do variant covers because people like that style.
Yeah.
And there's something that they're drawn to specifically because it has a very clean line work. There is a very Japanese style to it.
Yeah.
that sticks out on the U.S. market.
So wait, are you familiar with this one?
Which one are we talking about here?
Oh, Witch Hat Atelier.
I am familiar with Witch Hat, yes.
Yeah, I literally just started it, like finished the first volume a few days ago, so I've been really enjoying it.
It's wonderful.
Yeah, no, the art has me. Like that's usually the selling point for me is,
like I mean, and I didn't show too much of the panel layouts because I don't want to like spoil the whole thing.
Yeah.
But it's really,
Right.
really nice panel layouts from everything I've seen so far too. Like, and I know it gets pretty wild with panel layouts
It
later
does.
too.
I got
Some
a
of the-
recommendation.
all right, step on up.
I kind of grew up with this throughout almost all its running. It was Digimon.
Oh sure.
Sure.
I mean, I have heard of it. I
It-
knew it was like a huge thing.
It kind of ran alongside Pokemon. Sort of, it didn't get as much of a big fan base, I guess. But it was mostly because the story of wanting to travel to another world, even if you're not, that wasn't their choice to begin with at first. Because I kind of grew up as a lonely kid because I had autism, and
Yeah.
I just felt like I wasn't fitting in with anybody, and this kind of felt like my friend group in a way.
I totally get that. I think we all have some book series somewhere that has been our friend.
Yeah.
I have like shelves and shelves of them, but and Digimon went a long time, right?
For like, I think it's still going to this day.
Oh wow.
It's still not as booming, like I said, with Pokemon, but
Pokemon had other factors though that drove it larger
Well, for
in
them-
the consciousness
I
beyond.
had never heard of manga or anime in middle school, but I was playing Red and Blue Pokemon.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, then that was it. The outside factors pushed Pokemon to
well, because they were
much
more,
higher cultural saturation in the country. Yeah.
Well, it's because they were more focused with like the games, and
Yes,
card
exactly,
games, and
yeah.
everything else.
Yeah.
While with Digimon, they were more focused on trying to get the show
Yeah.
off the ground
Yeah.
first.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, great recommendation. I will check it out. What do you got for us?
I'll take some.
And by the way, you're welcome to drop your name, or you can be an
Yeah.
anonymous internet
Oh, yeah.
podcast.
That's all good. I have a lovely recommendation known as Land of the Lustrous. Yes. It is I think it's got 12 volumes now. It had recently just ended about a little over a month or two ago. And it's about a race of gems immortal gems, who basically try to defend themselves from these beings that come from the moon known as the Lunarians, who come down, they break these gems, they collect them, and they take them back to the moon to decorate their moon with these gems. The beautiful thing about the story is every time one of the gems breaks, they lose pieces of themselves, like their own memories. So it goes and delves heavy into psychological aspects of a non-human race of individuals.
Yeah, because I remember seeing that as a show. I was like, I like the art style of it. That drew me in a bit.
Yeah.
I've been meaning to read the manga because I hear like the situation gets so much worse, and
Yes.
I'm fearful, but I'm also excited to know.
It's a fun adventure, yeah.
So it started 2012 and it just ended
Yes.
like last month.
Yeah, it was monthly.
Wow.
And the
Yeah.
biggest part of it was like they had like a monk or whatever that they kind of looked to as like a father figure, sort of.
Yep.
Because there was like
Okay.
a lot of them, and there was only one person.
I got you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Also, you're reminding me in terms of manga that are finally like fully released in the U.S. Like I think Delicious in Dungeon the final volume like literally just came out
What's
in
it
the U.S.
called?
Delicious in Dungeon.
It's on
So
Netflix.
good.
It's also on Netflix. Yeah.
Okay.
Basically,
Netflix buying up all this manga property.
They are.
I
They
know, right?
they
But they're
basically-
crushing it, right? Like they're doing a good job.
I mean, the thing that
Doing
gets me
great.
is like, I feel like in terms of the different streaming services, besides like Crunchyroll because that's all anime, none of
Crunchyroll
the
is by
other,
default.
like streaming services even advertise their anime. Like, there's anime on Disney Plus, but you wouldn't know that going through any part. Like, they literally made new Code Geass movies like these past couple months.
Huh.
No one, there's no publication about that in the U.S. at all.
And some of them don't even air in the U.S. on Disney Plus.
Exactly. Yeah.
And some of them don't even air in the U.S. for general
But-
reasons. Like Yu-Gi-Oh had a season 0.
Yes, it
before
did.
It had a season 1, and that didn't even air in the U.S. because of how quote unquote graphic it was.
I assume
mean-
a lot of that's probably rights issue stuff. I mean,
Yeah, because season 1 was like a different animation studio
Yeah,
also.
yeah.
Also like Yugi sends a lot more people to their deaths.
yeah. Well, and also, but like, So Disney has various animes there, but
but
they also have their own animation. So
yeah, exactly.
If
So
you're
not going to advertise.
yeah,
They have
if
more IP than they literally.
yeah, exactly.
Literally.
They could create
It's
one
so-
famous IP like show a day, and they still wouldn't use all their.
I think
Right.
they also know Crunchyroll exists.
Exactly,
And so
yeah.
like, why are we trying to compete, quote unquote,
Yeah.
compete? So yeah, but it is pretty scattershot.
I'm
though,
waiting
right?
for the really dark Apple TV anime. I'm sure when they do it, they're gonna crush it.
I think there are some like anime on Apple TV, but I wouldn't know it.
Yeah,
Is there any
well, you know
animation
what?
on Apple TV?
They,
I have no
feel like
I don't think they have any
there was, yes. I just don't remember.
original animation.
I think so, but they didn't like they are.
They don't advertise anything really, but
Literally, yeah.
yeah.
It's like
I think.
But just in terms of the streamers that have, I mean, Netflix is the obvious one because
Right, yeah, I
they
feel
do
like-
they do everything, and they also buy so much from the world. They're a truly global broadcaster, as it were. So
But Netflix had a learning curve because
oh yeah, they did.
you know we all know about the attempt at the live action
Oh my god.
Full Metal Alchemist.
Oh boy.
That one was
Right.
not as good, but one.
Well, but you know they're gonna try again.
Yeah.
right?
Right.
It's
Yeah,
like it's just a matter of time.
Right.
And
But
it
that's-
should be a long show, right? You can't fit it in a movie.
That's always the move, though, right? That a manga is produced, then someone creates an anime of it, comes over to the States, and then eventually someone's going to try to take that anime and make it live action. Like that's
That's
just
what we do.
that-
here. We're like,
that's
how
the
do we get
progression.
More money out of it?
Yeah,
Well,
yeah,
like,
like
for
that's
Sure,
the progression.
That was a creative thing you did, but we want the money.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
You want to push that out? Just get it
Yeah.
out quick.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm a Transformers fan. I'm used to them just, like,
Clearly, yeah.
wanting money. I mean, that's a whole pre-purpose for some movies.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And
Well,
there's new Transformers comics now, right?
Oh, yeah,
well, they
there's
have been
a lot of.
they have been I mean, for a long time.
They've
they
been
were-
doing it since it came out.
Yeah,
But there
the
was like a new number one or something.
Yeah,
there-
yeah,
it-
Skybound recently got the rights.
yeah.
So
It's good. But no problem. But the IDW run of Transformers
Oh, yes, it
previously for the previous about 10 years was excellent.
Solid.
It was absolutely excellent. It was incredible. And you know, so now new publisher has the rights. You're going to get a new launch to it. But Transformers is one of those perennial IP sellers because there are ingrained like people who love the comics and love the lore from that. I mean, everything we know about Transformers in terms of what was in the cartoons and things like that, all that stuff started in the comics because they were given a bunch of toys, like prototypes of toys, and a bunch of comic creators had to come up with the names and the backstory, and they wrote all that. Same thing for G.I. Joe. I'm a big G.I. Joe comic
yes.
fan. Like they did the same sort of thing. Like the origin was the same way of just they were given like character names and drawings, and they had to write the whole thing to get make it all up, and then what you see in the cartoons and the various movies and all that, like the lore that it goes back to, was just because they had to pump out comics.
Right.
So
Yeah.
yeah.
I've been reading the Skybound Cobra Commander, and that's been
Yeah.
a while. It's been a fun ride.
The new Skybound stuff, it's only a couple issues in right now as recording this. It's good stuff. It's really, really good. They got some smart creators in it. I like it a lot. Yeah. Yeah.
And same with the Transformers ones. Like
Yeah.
I'm not the, it's I had.
I'm sorry, I don't carry any cash.
Yeah.
Like I'm not as attached to the
like,
Skybound
yeah, like,
Transformers
that's
like
never-
storyline as I was the IDW, just because
Yeah.
it hasn't gone on as long. But
Yeah.
I really love the art and really
I-
how they
I-
use color
I
and
was
typography.
I was going to ask about that because Daniel Warren Johnson, who's the writer, well, he started as writer artist, now he's just writer.
Yeah.
He has a very specific style that
There was a bad live
Oh.
action Death too, right?
it can be pretty divisive in that because of how it looks and the way he draws characters, there's a kind of a sketchiness to it, like an unfinishedness to just the way he draws, and it's the way he does all his books. And so I'm always curious. Like my brother, huge Transformers fan, not the biggest Daniel Warren Johnson fan, art-wise.
Yeah.
He read it though because he's going to keep reading it.
course, yeah.
But I know people will have to turn off, and so I'm curious for someone who has read some manga, read a lot of decent amount of manga.
Oh my, yeah. I mean, I've
Yeah.
read. I mean, I've also read like the Transformers manga from like the 90s.
Okay, sure, yeah,
So I'm
yeah.
a bit of a Transformers
Yeah.
nerd.
Yeah.
So my main thought is like I think it's kind of difficult because
We have markers
I think a
over
lot
here
of
for
people are
that if
going
you
in
feel like
fresh
adding
from
to
like
our list.
the later IDW stuff, which
That's all my
like
terrible handwriting.
the robots in there were so
in general,
lovingly
doing
like
manga
drawn.
movies.
There's like
yeah.
so much
Oh, okay.
characterization.
Well,
it's hard to really replicate that unless you're like.
And that was a big thing. It was such a hard shift from a very clean line work and very distinctive robots and characters to what Daniel Warren Johnson had done to start with.
Yeah.
It's a big change, and so you run that risk whenever you switch artists and all that.
Exactly.
But if you're liking the story and you like where it's going, then you'll stick with it.
And I feel like there's kind of some appeal for like how they were drawn in like the Marvel comics as well. I haven't even gotten very far in any of the Marvel comics for the Transformers runs.
Yeah,
I kind of see some appeal.
Yeah, that's old school stuff though.
Yeah.
I'm curious for you guys who are manga fans, because I personally actually am not. But if
it's all good. I'm Will. How's it going?
do you prioritize writing versus artwork? If a book has, if you had a book that either like the writing more, if you had to choose one, would you stick with a book that has good writing but bad art that you don't like, or good art and so writing? Which one are you more likely to stick with?
Have you ever seen the original art for One Punch Man?
No, I've not.
Can I show you?
Yeah.
I think people.
Okay, so do you know of One Punch
Yeah,
Man?
yeah.
Okay.
No,
Original.
go ahead. Yeah, it's just.
Yeah,
So you said depends.
Like, for example, because like Naruto was a big hit in both writing and art.
Yeah.
But if I had to go with Naruto's story, it was a little bit better than Boruto. But if we're going for art, Boruto looked a little more detailed in the manga wise. So it just depends on which like story you're going.
Okay.
Yeah, I think really my feeling is writing is so important for this, but even if the art isn't technically good, I think good paneling is such a big part of it, because you can't really have one without some aspect of the other. Like,
it is one medium, but
Right.
but
I think I'd prioritize writing over art. I think no matter how good the art is, if I'm not invested in the writing, if I'm not invested in the story and what's happening, then no amount of good art could save that.
Can cover that up.
Like,
Yeah.
I've
That's a fair argument.
I've dropped more stories because the writing was so atrocious or boring than I have because the art was bad.
Yeah, and speaking of Death Note,
Wow.
no, I finished it. I was told that I should stop after like volume 4 or 5, but I finished it because I was like, how can I not? I'm on the edge of my seat after each volume, and then it was like, these guys are tired. I can tell, especially the writer. And it was like, clearly they were still picking up new readers in like Shonen Monthly, and they were doing so much exposition at the beginning of each one. They were recapping the entire series for the first half of every chapter for like the rest of the series. It got so hard to read. But one of our crossover recommendations, which I did write up there, so if you like Death Note, I was reading Death Note at the same time we were discussing this on our podcast, Kill or Be Killed. The premise of this is that a demon visits this guy in his sleeper at night.
No, he it's a guy who's he's clinically depressed. His life has gone down the tubes. He's looking to take his own life. And basically a demon comes to him and says, hey, I'll make you feel better, but you got to kill someone every month. And if you don't, like, you're gonna feel you're gonna feel like you're dying if you don't do this. And
he really believed, like, he understood the arrangement was you kill someone at the end of every month, or I kill you. And so one month he resisted, and he started feeling really sick, and he was like, I don't know if I'm in my own head or if I'm actually dying, if this is real or not. And his girlfriend's name is Kira.
Oh my gosh.
And this was all a coincidence, because in the single issues they write little letters to their readers every month. And by like issue 4 or 5, he was already getting questions like, "Dude, are you just ripping off Death Note?" And he's like, "I haven't heard of that, but that sounds interesting. I should check it out."
Yeah, there are similarities like that, but no, I trust someone like Ed Brubaker who wrote this, longtime comic writer, legendary comic writer. For him to, he's not going to crib something like that, but there are some fairly eerie comparisons there. Yeah. Well, I don't know.
There is coming out monthly.
There aren't. I mean,
When was it Killer Be Killed?
When was it?
I mean, I
That's
love
true.
Ed Brubaker, don't get
But
me wrong.
I also think there is a whole, like, it's such a common, like, genre of, like, someone has to kill or else
Yeah,
consequences
of course, yeah,
happen.
yeah,
So it's
that-
like,
yeah.
I think a lot of people are going to play off that.
It was the name Kira.
I think
that really got me.
it was the girlfriend's name being Kira that people were like,
That,
wait a
and
minute.
It was like that was the one side of it, and then by volume 2, you're also following the cop investigating,
Oh,
which is
okay, yeah.
that's also very Death
So
Note,
sad.
and that's when the letters started pouring out in Rebecca's mailbox.
Oh,
Like, see,
Which
the
one?
situation with Death Note was that it was a good story, but the problem was finding a way to keep it going. It's like you can only write a person's name so many times in one book.
Do you guys find that with manga? You know, I mean, obviously we're talking about books that go on volumes and volumes versus, you know, a lot of comics. If you get to like 20 issues or 30 issues, single issues in a Western comic, like that's like cause your celebration.
right?
That's like holy crap, you made it. You know, so super long runs are incredibly rare. And even if they are super long runs, a lot of times it'll be like you get 6 issues and then there's like 4 months off because the artist's hand's going to fall off.
Yep.
You know, and then they come back, and so it's regular, but there are gaps built in so creators don't burn out. Do you guys find that the longer you read some of the longer running, longer tenured books that like you can see a point where someone's like,
Yes.
they're getting they're hitting a wall?
It happens, like, I feel like it happens often, and I think where it happens the absolute most is with shonen series.
Yeah.
Since it's like
Because it's weekly.
Yeah, especially because you have monthly, or like you have weekly shonens. I feel like monthly shonens, they have it a little better. They're able to do their stories better and not get as burnt out. They still can, but the weekly stuff, I mean, they're pushing those authors weekly with very little breaks. And over time, you get to 600 chapters, 15 years later of writing, and they start getting all these health issues. And you just get many, many problems. But at the end of the day, it's still that story. And so there's that sort of charm that allows a lot of the readers to still love what it is.
Because it is the same creators. They're still working on them. It's just, it's like I said, at some point you can hit, and I know, you know, burnout. I know in Western comics it's probably far more, it's probably as common, but I know there are all kinds of stories out of artists in Japan who are just like they're working the ways that guys worked in comics like in the 50s.
Yeah.
You know, like your stories from like the Marvel bullpen where guys are just it's all hands on deck. There's like 15 people down there. They're working like 17, 18-hour days, just putting books out, writing scripts, and it's just it's just a machine. And so you're getting these because they have to publish, but at some point it's like, well, like you got to take care of yourself here. It's the reason why a lot of those guys struggle with health issues. You know, it takes a toll on the body now. We're much more aware of that now, and it's a much greater conversation in Western comics of like, you know, someone says they need a break. Someone's, you know, they're not, you know, the fans of that book aren't knocking the walls down. They'll be like, all right, if you need a break, like, if we get the story again in 6 months, 8 months, 3 years, like, okay, like, take care of yourself. Come back, just so we know it's you doing it. There isn't this push as much now of like you got hit every week, every month. If you don't do that, you lose readers. There's a little more acceptance that in U.S. comic market because it's almost like it's built in now to the publishing schedule that there are going to be some breaks.
Like sad news about like Larry Hama.
Yeah.
He said he can't even like write signatures anymore.
Yeah. And
And I got to see it 2 years ago.
speaking about G.I. Joe, Larry Hama has written 300 some issues of G.I. Joe. He's written every issue of G.I. Joe, The Real American Hero. It's 307 issues, writing it since 1982. On top of all the work he did at Marvel, I said Wolverine, Punisher, did all of that. And you get to a point, where, you know, there's, you know, so many comic artists as they reach the end of their careers and unfortunately the end of their lives have tons of health issues because it's not the easiest thing on the body.
No.
Whether you're writing at a desk or you're drawing, they suffer a lot of issues. And I know we have Japanese artists run the same sort of health issues, just that they seem to get less breaks.
Yes.
Where they're allowed less breaks. You know, that the industry there just doesn't account for that, doesn't let them do that.
I have seen some big breaks.
Well, I
I
was
think
telling,
Yeah.
like, for example, people with like Naruto, Shojin is like a big group, so they're going to be able to have more people on deck. But if you're like a single person starting out, like I bet Stan Lee had trouble writing his first few years.
Stan didn't write a whole lot.
He wasn't alone either.
Yeah,
He was a tinkerer.
that's a whole. But that
He
you're,
wrote as much as Steve Jobs coded.
You're right though. That era of the '60s into the '70s was a golden era for comics. But you said it was, as I'm saying, that's where the work conditions were just. I mean, they're abominable. Like no one, like if you had someone try to work that now, like you wouldn't be in business.
No.
And no comic publisher now can put that kind of schedule on their creators. But yeah, back in the day, that's what it was. And I can definitely see for some of the mangas that are single creator. Yeah. Some guys can, yeah. So, some guys can, but they're Sean Phillips, the guy who draws Kill or Be Killed. He's one of the fastest artists in all of comics. Was that? They absolutely do Criminal, yeah. They're
Get him started on it. Rebecca Phillips, we don't have.
They're my favorite duo in comics. But yeah, you can see how burnout can happen, and it is. So when a book you're reading, if you notice like a drop in quality, like is it something that like do you clock it consciously?
Yes.
But are you thinking of like I got to stick with it because I'm pot committed, like I've invested so much time already, or will it reach a level for you guys where you'll jump off? Like if it decreases to a point, do you guys reach that?
It depends. I mean, if I was heavily invested and love that series and I stuck with it for a long time, if it really feels like the story's really getting to a point where I just really can't feel it anymore and I'm just like, I don't know what's going on, I wish I could support, but there's a lot of great series out there and I might want to read something else, but I do my best to stick until I can't. So
I think for me the biggest issue usually comes like if I'm reading something especially niche where the only translation is like terrible machine translation. At some point it's like, okay, I can't reasonably tell what's going on, and this machine translation, I'm sure the writing is better than this translation is giving me.
Yeah.
So, and I don't think this ever has any chance of being picked up by any U.S. publisher. So, like, at some point, you have to either give up or
learn Japanese.
Yeah, that's. I mean, that's the in the process.
You threw that one out too quickly. I was like, wow.
I know. Yeah.
Always learned Japanese.
I mean, that's the process, but it's a little bit of a long.
Yeah.
But Manga Manga was doing Japanese lessons for a while, right?
We had a Japanese teacher that hosted a few meetups here.
It was like back when you were at the old location.
She recently had an event about two ones ago where it was like talking about traveling in Japan, but she's a Japanese teacher herself.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. I remember like, man, that's a level of commitment I'm not ready for.
Yeah, it's a big one.
Do you jump off series, Mike? I know. For me, it's very difficult for me to cancel a series.
With comics and manga, I see it through to the bitter end. I ride it down to the ground. TV shows, I will bail on. I've still not seen. I'm missing one episode only of The Good Place, which was the finale.
Oh yeah.
I bailed right before the finale. I was like, I don't like where this is headed.
Dang.
I don't think I care.
I don't have OCD, but something like that is like
holding in a sneeze.
At some level, I know for me, because collecting Western comics, collecting them monthly, for me it's either this thing's only 12 issues, so I'm at 8, I guess I'll get the rest, or it's I'm 75 issues in.
You
can't stop now.
I
I got to keep reading this. I got to keep buying it.
All or nothing.
Exactly.
Right, no, I mean, that happened. Like there was a stint, probably a year, not that long ago, of Batman. It just wasn't very good. But it was like, that was the 835th issue of Batman. Like 600 of them have been pretty good. I'm just gonna stay on board this train. See where it goes.
I do have a completionist gene, so it's not an OCD gene, but there is an idea of completionist. Of like, if I started this, like I can't not have all of them.
Yeah.
It's not about whether I like it or not.
You don't do the rage reading thing where you're like, I hate this thing. I'm gonna read it so I go online and complain about it.
It's
occasionally that's fun.
I've done that.
Yeah, not
There's
for
plenty of them out there.
Weirdly, not for reading. But like movies and television shows, like if something I start watching and it's terrible, like I'll finish it so I can tell you exactly why I don't like it. I don't do that with reading though.
I always think of the line that's like, you can learn more from a bad piece than you can from a good, because you can
Yeah.
really see
Why
why,
does it- yeah.
it doesn't work. Like, you can see the green screen if they did it badly and they have the little green halo, or if the panel
And
is
that's something
just broken.
that's something that Mike and I don't talk about. And I love Kieran Gillen, the writer. I love Jamie McKelvey, the artist. I love other books they work on, but I can recognize this is a really good book that it like everything about it misses for me. Like the premise, like none of it hits me, and so I can read it and understand like why I understand why people really connect with it, and just know that it's just it's every possible chance. Well, it's less about that. It's just that maybe I don't know if I were, if it would hit better, but it's just I hate all the characters. I find them all insufferable.
Yeah.
And that's part of the idea. That the general idea of that book is like every so 100 some odd years, gods come down and they imbue fame and fortune and money on like teenagers and early 20 somethings.
Right.
And I'm at a point now where like
You don't care. Yeah. It's
can't
like,
stand those
yeah.
people. Like they're the worst. Like Gen Z kids. Like I'm sorry,
They'll put money in their hands. Yeah.
but so
teenagers, those are like the protagonists of like all of them.
Well,
It's always young people.
and that's the thing. So it's not. I don't think against that. I love Young Avengers.
It's giving them money.
I love Runaways. I love the X.
Runaway.
So it's less about the teenage characters and just that like the way they wrote them. And I believe it's a feature, not a bug. They wrote them in a way where they're supposed to be like insufferable brats.
Yeah.
Right.
You know. But so just for me, thus I understand people who read this book and who like really love it. I can hear them. I get it. And I can flip through the book because I love Jamie McKelvey's art, but also I know it's like I'm never reading this book again because I'm not getting through it. I read it basically almost out of peer pressure because so that's one I read because I wanted to finish because I wanted to be able to articulate, hey, here's things I don't like about it, but I can understand why people do. It's rare for me to read a book that everyone's like, this is garbage.
Right.
There are books I look back on now that I read that is like, you know, I used to think that was good, and now I look back and be like, no, this was really terrible. Do you guys have some of that?
Yes.
Like, it's actually
man.
real quick, just ballpark. How long have you guys been reading manga? How long have you guys been into it?
God, I started when I was like 10, so about almost 20 years.
Okay.
So funny story is I got at least into anime in 2017.
Okay.
And then I really got into manga in, I would say 2020, but I don't know if you've read Bleach.
Okay.
But Bleach, was one of the earlier animes I watched, and like I realized, oh, there's a whole section here that's not been animated, and so I was like, oh, it's a manga. What is that? And so like that was the first dive, and then it kind of just went from there.
You got to get the rest of the story, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
For
All
me,
right.
it was more like sort of that. I grew up more with the shows,
Okay. Went from the adaptations to
and
it
then
went-
I guess more because I was never a good reader because of all my conditions, and eventually I did get into more manga because it was more easier to read, and it's like, okay.
That's good. That's good. So 20 years, I was going to say. So you've seen some of the transition, the way that manga has moved from where it was into more the mainstream.
Yes.
Yes.
Very
my,
quickly too.
Yeah. Well,
It's-
yeah. 20 years. I mean, 20 years ago, if you started looking for, a shop like Manga Manga wouldn't exist.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, the usual place was Walden Books back when
Yes.
that was available, and I mean, it was really fascinating to see them go from like one tiny shelf to basically a whole aisle of manga to
Yep.
shutting down completely.
Yeah.
And now it's like at Target.
I'm like, yeah, it's so.
They have manga at Target.
There was a brief period of time where you could buy the manga fruits basket at the grocery store,
No.
and
That's
I
a
don't.
weird spot.
It's
to
such
sit.
a weird.
Archie at the grocery.
Yeah.
The
It's
some places still have actual periodicals for Western comics, but I just think my brother was a very huge manga and anime fan back in the day, and so like we're talking like 30 years ago when he was doing this, when you couldn't get it anywhere, you had to get it. Everything was imported.
Yeah.
It weirdly, a lot of it came through the UC Irvine bookstore. That was like a main hub. He ordered stuff from there all the time.
Do you remember like 20 years ago or so when they had like Shonen Jump
yes, I have.
published in
I-
America?
At home, I have like old issues of Shonen Jump and Shotobi back when like Viz was making those issues physically, and they were so delightful. And I really, honestly, my main issue sometimes with American comics is just I wish it was easier to get like just wherever. Like I feel like the
Okay,
publishing
so that
situation is.
a very interesting point, because we had a comic writer on our podcast a few months ago, and he was saying like every time he has a meeting with the executives at like Marvel, DC, Image, whoever he's writing for, he's like, manga is like kicking our butt, and it's because it's so accessible. It's like, you know, the closest, like the Shonen Jump app is insane.
Right.
It's $2.99 a month.
And there's
It used to be
hundreds of
$1.99
titles.
a month.
Yeah, they add up
And like, but like every issue they've ever done is there, and like the new stuff is there almost immediately.
Right.
And the comparable thing is like Marvel Unlimited, which I think is like $10 a month, and has very spot collections of issues. Like,
I mean,
you can't say like I'm gonna go read everything Spider-Man ever,
Right.
because it's like, oh, sorry, we don't have this 300 right there.
Yeah.
But you jump forward another one, we got that, and then we got that, and then we got that. We don't have the most recent stuff. We gotta go buy that.
They did.
And it's like, this is terrible.
Well,
They
but
did just make it better too. Viz, like the publisher for like a lot of, they don't just do shonen stuff, but they do a lot of other things too. If you go in the Viz app, they've now released their whole catalog for $2.99 a month, even
real
outside of
good.
shonen.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I think part of that.
Now I know why manga writers are always like starving.
Yeah.
And going,
A lot of that is, though, I think some of the perception about what you're supposed to or expected to read. Like Marvel wants you to read Spider-Man,
Right.
but they in no way expect you to read have read all of Spider-Man.
Right.
No.
Like that isn't a priority for them. They don't want you to read all of it. They just want you to read it now. Same thing with Batman and Superman and the X-Men, all of that. So the idea that you can't get every issue.
Ladybug on your microphone.
Ladybug Mike.
Oh, how about that? How you doing? So the idea that it's all not available, like that's part of it, because they don't care that it's not available, because they don't expect anybody to have to have read all of that.
Yeah,
So,
no, I think,
yeah.
but the point is like, if it's not going to cost you anything, it just feels like a restriction that's unnecessary.
Yeah, it's like the
And the
Disney
fact that the
vault.
newest stuff, it's like, if I wanted to read this month's Daredevil, I couldn't get it in Marvel Unlimited.
Yeah,
I'd have to buy it.
but okay,
for
again,
$6 for a single issue.
there is a strong restriction in a resistance in Western comics to digital, and Marvel still has a day and day. They have a digital. Most of their comics have a digital code where you can redeem it, and then you can read it on your Marvel Unlimited app. But you have to buy the comic as well. DC had that for a while, and they got rid of it. I think because they were seeing that. I don't know.
Remember, they don't care.
Yeah.
That's what it was.
Yeah,
they were like, wait a second.
Yeah, so
this is a lot of work.
There's a huge resistance to that idea, and I think I think it really just comes down to the way they think about publishing and what they want their customers to have access to. Marvel and DC and all the publishers in the U.S. They want you to go and buy the new stuff now.
Right.
Yep.
You know, they want you to spend 10, 12, 17, 18 bucks on a collection. Read that thing versus the accessibility of something like the Shonen Jump app or Viz or whatnot. Like they don't want that. So
I'm pretty ignorant when it comes to manga. Like I don't read it a ton. Like I've read some here and there, like the Shonen Jump magazine and stuff. But I'm way into superheroes, American comics and stuff.
Yeah, your
So-
shirt.
yeah,
Yeah.
give that
I
away.
never
Yeah.
would have guessed.
So like, apparently, the main driver of stuff nowadays is also like pre-orders too, specifically from like distributors. So
Well, yeah.
they think it's like the old, like local comic distributors and stuff have, or not local comic
Yeah.
distributors, but local comic markets, and then the distributors having that stranglehold on the industry.
Well, it is a big part of it in terms of how comics.
Two of them
Yeah,
got
well, yeah.
practically a monopoly.
How comics are sold in that. Yeah, the idea of you have to order. Shops have to order books 3 months in advance.
Right.
Yeah.
So you got to place your order, and you're not going to know how it's going to do on a monthly series until after 3 issues in. So,
Yep.
you know, most shops know. You know, if you're a good shop, you should know what your reader base is. You're going to order a lot of number 1 because everyone loves number 1.
Right.
But then you gotta know what to cut to, because you're gonna cut that number down for number 2 and 3, and before you actually see those results now, you know, you got to make that call blind. And then depending on how well that is sold, pre-sold, and how well that comes through, because there is no sell-through data. Like there's no sound scan for comic shops, so we don't actually know how many people are actually buying them. The only numbers we have are what the shops are buying.
Right.
So
Like, that stuff doesn't happen in manga, though.
yeah,
It's very different
Yeah,
printing.
well, because I think it's closer to the book market, where like
Yeah.
you know
It's like some books, same
Yeah, but
realm.
you understand books nowadays are also like 100% pre-ordered too.
yeah.
Or as far as like.
Well, I think you always want to pre-order because you want to show that there's interest for it. But in terms of tracking sales and all that, I believe manga is much closer to the book market where you know exactly what you've sold. It's not about like no one cares how many books Manga Manga buys, but you know how many books Manga Manga has sold.
Yeah.
Our local comic shop, they have their numbers. They know what they've sold, but when you look at the industry as a whole, you don't know what that is. So you had
Well, like I was saying to her, the main thing is that the difference is with like comic, most people in the Western era don't kind of see them as books really so much.
Yeah.
Whereas with manga, because it's more thicker and longer, people are able to like stock the shelves.
you're right. It is still. I mean, it is still technically a periodical. I mean, the monthly floppies are still considered periodicals.
The only periodical left.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't know what we're talking
Print
about.
media.
My dad has still has a subscription to Civil War magazine.
Well,
And I'm like,
that's
there's
like-
a finite amount of information. Like, I know there's only so many things Batman can do, but I know for a fact there's only so many things that happen in the Civil War.
there's an actual end to Civil
Yeah.
War.
Right.
Yeah,
Like, spoiler alert.
yeah.
I haven't broken to him yet. But
Yeah.
All over the U.S. about it.
But yeah, that is a big part of it. The idea, just the structure of the publishing is so much different. And if comics moved, and they never will, but if comics moved to a solely original graphic novel trades in collection and everyone, I mean, that changes the writing because there's a difference for creators, artists and writers if they're saying, hey, we're going to do a 150-page complete story versus we're going to do 5 30-page stories that eventually collect. So the mindset is totally different, and it'll never shift that way. I believe because the people making it love single issues too much. Like the creators don't want to do that. The creators who do that do it because they have a story in mind that they feel works better that way. But they'll never abandon single issues.
Right.
And so as long as that exists, the way the industry sells comics and publish them is going to exist, which always puts them behind the 8 ball, which is why comics have been dying for 30 years.
Right.
Like, that's just how it is.
It's frustrating
Yeah.
because I feel like there's so much that could be changed and comics would really be thriving.
Yeah.
But
Part of it is just entrenchment. You know, that this is how it's always been done, how it's always been published. So this is how it's always going to be published. When there are potentially better ways. It's just a matter of getting
Like webtoons, that's become a big now.
and
Webtoons are huge. Yeah.
and both Marvel and
But they're
DC.
free.
Marvel and DC have gotten into that where they've created content specifically in that format.
I
Through
wish we had that, and there were little homages to it. I wish we had the Nightwing issue with this. There was one, printed comic that was a continuous scroll
So
from
cool.
left to right.
and
For the entire 24 pages or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was unreal.
It
But
was-
now, good luck getting a copy.
Right.
it was phenomenal. But that idea of taking the idea of the webtoon and just turning it horizontal for the comic page. But both Marvel and DC have been doing that because they see a lane there, and that is part of the Marvel Unlimited, DC Infinite, or whatever their apps, the same sort of digital service that each one of them has. They have specific comics that are creators who have done in that manner, and then eventually, for the most part, both of them have taken those. It's Korean.
That's Korean.
They've taken their webtoons and actually put them in print as well because they know there's still an audience for people who want that.
Yeah, some people are a little weird about the long scrolling.
Yeah.
Like in the format, so it does help they put them in the print because now it's left to right.
So I personally am not a fan of webtoon, but that's just I don't like reading in that way. I really think it's reading digitally. I read tons of my comics digitally, but that's because I have a decent sized tablet and it mimics the size of a standard comic page. And so I still see everything that I'm going to see if I'm turning pages. Just I don't got to carry all that around all the time. You know that's the draw. So.
Here's what I was going to ask to our manga experts. There's an issue. It's not in that book, but it's in volume 2 of that, where it's a full 24-page issue with no words.
It's a silent
Oh,
issue.
that's
Yeah.
fun.
Because
Yeah.
it
Enough
it
said.
follows
well,
the dog. and the dog doesn't understand people, so it's just following this dog around. And eventually, you'll see like a caption bubble. It'll say like scribble, 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 like
Pizza.
pizza.
Yeah.
You notice
Yeah.
the word pizza.
Yeah.
But like other than that, and I'm like, has anyone in manga done that?
Yes.
It's gotta be, yeah.
Many. There's a few examples. I got 2 examples. One has some dialogue and one doesn't. There's a manga. I don't think it's translated to English. It's called Gon. I think it's about like a
Wait, how do I spell that?
G-O-N.
Okay.
I think it's called Gon, and it's about like a dinosaur or something like that. That like it has 0 dialogue. At all through it. Not going
not
from
that
Hunter x
Gon.
Hunter. Yeah. That's I think it's
That's
called
a guy.
that.
Different goal.
It's kind of like obscure, but it has no dialogue. And then there's another series. This one's a lot more popular, known as Blame or Blom.
Oh, yeah.
However you pronounce it. It's about a guy. His name is Killy, and he goes in this sort of He goes in this sort of huge. It's like a sort of post-apocalyptic story, and all of humanity is in this giant mega structure, this just sort of labyrinth, and he's exploring for this item known as the net gene that could potentially save humanity. And throughout the series, he has this like gravity gun that just kind of, it's really cool. And throughout the story, there's very, very little dialogue. It is very reliant on visual storytelling because the author is actually an architect. So his like architectural stuff in this
All his
story
background,
is
yeah.
like
So cool.
if you ever get a chance, like look up Blame panels and look at some of his like scenery.
How long of a series is going? Is it
I
like
think Blame is around 70 chapters, I think.
Okay.
And then there's like master editions that are pretty big, but he's made multiple works, and he's also vastly inspired by stuff like The Matrix and stuff like that too as well.
Yeah.
So
because when silent issues are they're a gimmick pretty much in Western comics. I love them. We already mentioned G.I. Joe and Larry Hama. One of the most famous silent issues, one of the first ones that were like that, was a G.I. Joe issue. That it was, it kind of kicked off this idea of like, oh, you can do stuff like that.
Yep.
That you can tell it all just that way. And you just mentioned Nuff Said. There was a few months at Marvel where it came down from editorial that they challenged every creator on every single book to do a silent issue. And it was a whole initiative where they tried to figure out a way.
It's during the writer's strike.
that's cool.
Oh.
No.
We'll stick it to them.
Try to figure out a
Silent
way
books.
in your ongoing story, whatever's going on, to make it a silent issue and make it plausible, make it believable. And they were all stamped with Nuff Said. That part was kind of ridiculous, but the idea that they went line wide and to try and do it. So every time you see something like that, it's kind of a special thing.
Right.
There is a book though, Step by Bloody Step, which is a book that Mike and I both love. Is a 4 or 5 issue. That's a totally silent book.
No words.
Yeah,
no
and
captions. Like it's not.
There's an alien language where you see characters.
okay.
So, but because it's a fantasy book, but it is this, to make it a comp to people might know, it's very much a lone wolf and cub kind of thing. It is a giant mech who is protecting this small child, who you see grow from like a baby to a young girl and all that, and all you know is their mission is they got to travel, they got to walk, they got to go from where they are to somewhere else, step by bloody step.
Sounds pretty cool.
Yeah,
It's really cool.
Yeah.
By the way, this book also has an alien language,
Yes.
which they don't give you the decryption key for until like volume 4.
Yes.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's
So then you have
Yeah.
to go back and reread the whole series
Yeah.
to translate everything.
Yeah,
Yes.
I remember I
Say what?
started that series.
Yeah.
Artist,
Cliff
Cliff
Chang.
Chang, yeah.
Cliff Chang.
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
I like the
Yep.
coloring.
Yeah. This
Yeah, the
Oh, the
colors
coloring is
really
what drew
cool.
this is
everybody in.
this is a gorgeous book.
like-
Paper Girls. Yeah. It
It's
has this neon.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Brian
So
K.
a
Vaughan,
lot
another
of
great.
people who read this book thought that Stranger Things was in the
I was
book.
wondering if like
It's like
people compared
80s
to
Kids
that.
on Bikes.
Yeah.
Yep.
This did come first, but they both came out in 2016.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It was very very close. It was very
the era
close.
of 80s nostalgia.
We all
Yeah.
got the same whiff of nostalgia.
Well,
It's like-
again, the Duffners, Brian K. Vaughan, myself, we're all of a certain age, and we've reached a point now where they're people who are making the content, and so they're making stuff about their childhood. So that's why you get that 80s whiff there. But Paper Girls is one of my favorite books.
It's really good.
It's really, really, really good. And yeah, what I have in front here, just different styles. The 3 books on the end here are all Japanese and Japanese-ish artists.
I own this one.
Monstrous, yeah,
I
Monstrous.
haven't read it, but the covers
Yeah, I
are
was
crazy.
looking at the cover.
Yeah,
It's
so this
really
is
good.
Monstrous is Marjorie Liu, who is a Taiwanese American, I believe, and Sana Takada, who's a Japanese artist. This is a fantasy book that is based like deeply in just all kind of East Asian folklore and fantasy. They pull from kind of all manner of Chinese, Japanese, Korean, whatever it is, and the art style there. Sana Takada has an art style. It is very reminiscent of kind of a Junji Ito,
Yeah.
wood carving, very traditional
it's
kind of art.
gorgeous.
It is stunning book, stunning book. That it is, and like deep
take a picture of it?
deep mythological lore.
Yeah.
That they've built an incredible world with that. It's an awesome book.
Another Wolverine writer.
Yeah. Marjorie Liu, also did a bunch of Marvel work as well. Marvel, X-Men. She's done a ton of stuff. Yeah.
And the beautiful thing is this is an Image comic,
Yeah.
and Image has a tradition of starting volume 1s at 99.
That
Yeah.
yep.
Nice.
$10 always.
$10.
And they also they're just start from 1 and go on from there.
Well,
They seem
and
to feel-
that's
Well,
the
they
thing.
hook you because the next one's like 17.
Yeah, exactly.
The idea with independent comics and creator-owned comics is that the barrier for entry is much lower because it's Monsters has gone on. I think issue 53 just came out, which is a lot. I mean, you get a run like that. That's a big time,
He's
especially
drawing a fantasy epic.
especially for a creator-owned book. But still, relative to Batman, which is in the 800s, Spider-Man in the 800s, like with those superhero stories, all you got to do is find something that's got a 1 on it and just start there. They don't expect you to jump back. But with a creator-owned something, a creator-owned comic, independent comic, you could absolutely start at the beginning, and it's feasible you could get through all of it.
Right.
Even if it's 50 issues, 70s, or something like that, you could. It's conceivable you can, and you're also expected to, because those stories you can't jump in the middle of.
Yeah.
You can jump in the middle of any superhero story and just through context clues figure out what's going on.
Right.
I was gonna say, I think that is probably the biggest similarity between manga and creator-owned works is that
Yes.
they actually tend to end.
Yes.
Whereas
yes.
superhero books,
Yes.
they don't.
It-
They
the-
never end. They
Yeah.
never will.
The whole if there is the biggest comparison
like
to
one
the biggest comparison to something like manga would be independent comics, creator-owned stuff,
Yeah.
things that those artists and writers are working on. Probably a finite story, or even if it's a long story, they have an idea in mind. Because you're right, the whole idea behind super stories, they never end.
Right.
That they keep going. Every generation has their own version of Spider-Man, Batman, Superman. The Flash. Everyone who comes in, because depending on how old you are, that's the version of the character that you always see, and that's built into the concept of it.
Right.
So something like Monstrous, which is an absolutely gorgeous book here. I already talked about Superman Smashes the Klan by Jin Louis Yang and Gerda Hiro. Also have I Kill Giants, which is written by Joe Kelly, art by
Black and white.
Ken Niyamura. It is Ken Niyamura is a Japanese Spanish artist, I think. Japanese Portuguese, I'm not sure what it is, but he has. You look at that art there, and not just the art
tell.
style,
Yep.
but also the way it's paneled, the way everything about it is very much a manga.
It's even black and white.
Exactly.
Right,
Yeah.
You can tell what he reads in his free time.
Yeah, and the way they draw sound effects and everything like that, it is all there. That book actually also won it won gold at the International Manga Award, I believe, which is given out in Japan it recognizes the best manga not drawn by Japanese manga artists around the world.
Oh yeah.
So if you look at their list, there are people from creators from all over the world. But the year that book came out, I Kill Giants, that took top prize for the year, and it's also a great story. It has been made into a live action. I don't think it's been made into an animated, but it's a really beautiful, haunting book. Just a great story. But yeah,
I love Joe Kelly. I love him because I'm a huge Space Ghost fan. He
Sure.
wrote one of the Space Ghost miniseries.
Okay, yeah.
But people of this age will like to know that Joe Kelly is one of the creators of a show called Ben 10.
Yes.
No
Yes.
way. I grew up with that series.
Yes,
so.
yes, that's true.
That's
right.
crazy.
Love Ben
That's
10.
right.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So that's a really great book, and the other ones I got here were just the variation, because I think a lot of people think of manga and they think of a very specific style.
Yeah.
Like they think of the style of that was caught from Disney, like we got big eyes, big expressions, things like that. And obviously all these books, like again, Sanataka doesn't draw that way because Junji doesn't draw that way, you know.
Yeah.
So there is no one style, but you still in your mind people think of a certain way. And I think for a long time Western comics were that way as well. Marvel and DC had house style. Like every book looked the same. It all looked like it looked like Jack Kirby, then it looked like Neil Adams, it looked like Jim Lee. Like it was a way to go. And now we're in a space where you can have so many more artists. You can have artists from Japan working regularly in
In fact,
the U.S.
These two came out about the same time.
Yeah.
Could those covers be more different?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. We got Paper Girls
Same
and Killer Be
publisher,
Kill. Yeah.
Same year,
Yeah,
2016.
yeah. You've got Frank Quitely here on All Star Batman, which is he's got a very specific style. All of his
I've heard you
faces,
say you don't like his style.
he draws faces, and everyone looks a little bloated. It's just
I can see it.
you know.
It's the camera.
It's- I
I
It
think
adds
also
10
the
pounds.
also the kind of the airbrushing, the way it's
Yeah,
done.
with the coloring, yeah.
The way it's shaded, but that is it. Also, Superman, one of the greatest Superman stories ever told. But Quitely is
In
an art,
fact,
but that's big
That
time
is
major
what
artist.
James Gunn claims he's making
Yeah.
his Superman movie based off.
Because the
of.
story's
That's
great.
just shot in Cincinnati last week,
The story's
really?
great.
Damn.
Yeah.
Okay.
So- and then you got
They were
someone
using
like
Union Terminal.
you got someone like David Aja.
Yep, of
That's
course.
what-
David Aja's art again. This is mainstream superhero stuff, and you see how much cleaner, how much simpler it is, and yet it still works.
Right.
They did two X-Men.
You can get all those styles in there, and I think seeing all those extra different styles across all kinds of storytelling, sequential storytelling, I think is what's great.
Yeah.
So people don't get a narrow-minded view of like, oh, it's manga, it's got to look a certain way.
Yeah.
There are obviously tropes in how the storytelling goes that are going to be
They did
present
Batman
throughout,
Forever,
but
they did.
seeing more variety. Are you guys seeing that more in terms of the creators that are coming out?
Incredible Watchmen.
I would say some of the newer stuff now. You're probably seeing more variety like that. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think also like there's a lot more variety for manga for like what actually gets translated officially and brought to the U.S. because I feel like that's also such a big part of it. Like we're only getting like a tiny portion
That is true.
of what actually is. There's so much more that gets published that isn't going to make it to the U.S. because maybe it got a few issues in Shonen Jump and got dropped, or
Someone's got to make a decision as to what comes over, what gets localized, and what
Yeah.
doesn't. That is true. That is true. But I mean,
but even like just what we get here, I feel like we're seeing more and more variety still.
Titans Go.
Seeing variety in how like where people get their influences, like different coloring styles for sure. Or I say coloring, it's not
Yeah.
the same. I mostly mean like people you may be using screen tones versus different gradients. You can kind of tell sometimes if someone is more used to digital
So it can't
drawing or if they got their start making comics traditionally, and it's really interesting.
so you can see that in because I know with a lot of Western I mean, most I don't want to say most, but a lot of Western artists now work digitally.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure
Yeah,
most
yeah.
manga also,
Yeah.
but I'm sure there's probably still manga out there that's done traditionally, and there's a lot of resources for traditional like pen works that I mean I got so many screen tones when I went to Japan because you can't buy that in the U.S. very easily.
Yeah. So I mean, do you see that in terms of like if someone has a book that's hand drawn, or and like you can tell like
You can tell.
this is not
Yeah.
digital.
Actually, there's a really cool example. Berserk. He was on paper, and then he went digital about like later parts of the series, and it's really cool because
Can you
I'll
see
have,
it?
Yeah, like I have one volume, and then the next one is when he transitioned, and I'm like, whoa, this
Yeah.
is like a fascinating thing to see the difference.
And I think still for a lot of Western comics, like there's still a lot that is done traditionally. Like I know for the IDW Transformers comics, a lot of the artists there, you would be able to buy pages that they did at conventions because they would do all the line work.
And that's a
Traditionally,
big part of
such a-
it in terms of why artists don't like to go digital is that like retirement plan is selling pages, and then that sounds really crass, but that's what it is. Like
there's hundreds per page.
Yeah, like original artwork is you hold on to that, so when it comes out at the end, you can start selling pages, and people will buy that. When you work digitally, like you don't have that option, and so, but yeah, there is always something. Nothing against digital art. I love the art when it looks that way, but there are some books that you can tell that this was hand painted.
Right.
You know, like
Yeah.
like a different level of different level, like an older level. You know, the way it was done back in the day when we didn't have computers to do all that stuff. You can tell, and it does jump out. Are there artists or creators that you guys will follow? Like, I know it's much less in terms of manga. Like artists, like you can pick up 7-8 books by a writer that they've done in a span of 10 years or whatnot. But do you guys have some that you'll follow?
I've got one that I'm following anywhere now. Let me get the name though.
All right. While he's looking it up, do you guys have
I
some?
do follow a few. I'm a big fan of this shonen series called D Gray Man, and she has gone on. She actually is a bi-month. She does a chapter every 3 months. She used to be a weekly writer back in early 2000s. Still does now, but you get 4 chapters a year. And her art has drastically gotten incredible. But I follow her on Instagram, and she'll post some illustrations like here and there. It's super cool to see.
Yeah, there's a few. I mean, one like Saren Stone is one of the like Transformers artists that I still follow to this day. They don't do comics, I don't think, so much anymore. I think last thing they did was like storyboards and stuff for Castlevania.
Okay. Yeah.
But like I thought like their work in like the Windblade comics was so like painter-esque and pretty.
Yeah,
like,
that was a cool series. Yeah.
Right?
Windblade's
Yeah.
a cool character.
Yeah.
Talk about a specifically Japanese coded transformer.
like,
Windblade, very much so.
Like
yeah.
I always thought
wow.
like the style, like the way like they drew like different characters, I thought was so pretty.
That's nice.
Like it's like so like I guess felt so different to me from other like so many other comics, and seeing like you know these mechanical beings with a very softer like softer lines was really pretty.
Yeah.
All right.
Did you find it yet, Mike?
I did.
All right. What do you got?
Well,
I think it's a bit of
I
both.
think this is why I don't remember the name. It always is Shima Shinya,
Okay.
who they do the entire thing themselves. So write, draw, coloring the covers. The first book I read was called Lost Lad London, which I just stumbled across in the manga shop. I
Yeah,
was like,
I know what you're
this
talking
looks
about.
cool. And then I was the only one subscribed to it. And now Glitch, I think, is a little more popular.
Yeah.
That's out there now. Last one coming up, I think, in October. And then a new one called Void Number 9. And apparently Star Wars stuff, but like Star Wars manga that hasn't made it to the States yet.
Okay. All right.
So I'm like, I have never read a Star Wars comic, but a Star Wars manga might be my first.
They have some.
That would be kind of fun.
If this person who I read everything they do, if they're doing Star Wars, I'm doing Star Wars.
So you guys watched on Disney Plus. You know, Star Wars did Star Wars Visions, right? Where they had a bunch of different anime studios, and then starting in Japan and then all around the world, tell different stories. They brought some of those into the comics. They've had some creators do that.
Oh, okay.
The two they've done were specifically Japanese. One creator, one artist by the name of she goes by the name of Peach Momoko. She is insanely popular right now.
Well, right.
Yeah, she is insanely popular right now. She's a Marvel exclusive artist. She started doing a bunch of variant covers just in her very Japanese style.
That's another
and people.
There's no translate. Like they don't do variant covers.
Well, yeah. But she's an artist that people would just buy her stuff because they would see it because it obviously didn't look like anything else, right? And then they started giving her basically they gave her own universe where she told like an alt version of the Marvel characters in this world of like Japanese fantasy and like yokai and things like that, and people loved it. And you know, she wrote it in Japanese, and then it was translated. So I don't know if it exists in Japan in Japanese. I have no idea because it came to the States, you know, in English. And now she's writing like a mainstream title, like it's called Ultimate X-Men. It's a new Ultimate Universe, but like it's not her own universe. Like it's connected to something larger. So you have this very distinct, very very Japanese style and sensibility mixing in now with the rest of larger Western comics and continuity, which is, you know, it's the kind of thing that would have never happened even like 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
You know, just to spotlight an artist like that, and because I think part of it is because there's a larger hunger for Japanese art and manga and things like that. When people saw her covers, people were like, "Ooh, what's that? That's different. I want that."
There was that
You know?
like, weird little time in the early 2000s where they tried to do
Well, and I was going to bring that up when you mentioned
age or whatever.
when you mentioned you've been reading for about 20-ish years. It's interesting that you that specific time period in the early aughts, both DC and Marvel took swings at bringing in manga. DC did it by basically localizing and bringing in comics that already existed and basically republishing them in English. I think that went for like 04, 05 to like 2010, something like that.
That manga?
Well, no, some of that came. They weren't doing original content. They were bringing in. They were localizing and bringing stuff in. Marvel tried something where they called it Marvel Tsunami. Which is really terrible. The only thing good about it, and I've mentioned this before on our show, the only thing good about it is that Runaway started from that, which is Brian K. Vaughan, Adrian Alphona, which is one of my all-time favorite books. But it came out in single issues like everything else. It came out in regular trade paperbacks like everything else. But it was one of the first times where Marvel started putting things out in the compact size, the size that is closer to tankobons that manga puts out. They're a little bigger, and even the stuff that DC and Marvel put out now, it's like an inch and a half bigger on all sides, but it's still significantly smaller than what you see on regular trade paperbacks. There's some stuff that's there, but they tried to capitalize and do this kind of like English version of manga but these are in continuity characters. Most of them are all gone now because they were terrible. But the Runaways are still around because that was Brian K. Vaughan and it was great. But digest size, that's what I couldn't think of for. The digest size. It's a little bit bigger than the manga books, but it's smaller. And that whole idea was we're going to gear that towards younger readers who may be into manga, who are not used to holding a larger trade paperback. They're used to holding that smaller digest compact size. And every so often they try to, both publishers try to go back to that. Marvel does it where they reprint a lot of the teen heroes, younger heroes, YA stuff, regular comics, but they reprint them in that smaller size. DC's got a whole line of YA, like a whole YA universe where all their characters are teens, young adults, and they only come out. They're full graphic novels that come out in that smaller size, and it's all marketed towards the younger audience, the audience that Western comics feels they're losing to manga. By literally trying to replicate that.
All right, it's 7:30. I say we do a little trivia.
You want to try? Okay. All right.
So I decided not to do big team trivia. This is every person for.
Hey listeners, just want to let you know I'm very sorry to say that upon review, it sounds like our audio interface or microphone or my laptop was dying. Something got bumped or ran out of juice, and the trivia is cut off, which is a shame because there were some wild answers. Anyway, we will post the trivia questions and the answers on our website, storiedarcs.com. You can pick up the rest there. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this crazy, chaotic conversation that may have come across as ASMR for you. But once again, the shop is Manga Manga in Cincinnati, Ohio, and we are Storied Arcs. We thank you for listening. Please tune in next time. And if you are a manga-only reader, we do have one manga covered on our podcast so far, which was Pluto, which was then adapted to a Netflix series, and we did a crossover with the Tankobon podcast, which is another great podcast you should check out that specializes in Shonen Jump Weekly. So, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time.